Beyond the 90, Kartik Krishnaiyer here. We haven't done one of these videos in a while, but we're going to start doing them regularly again, as well as podcasts and written content. I've had a very busy last 6 weeks, which is why I haven't been able to produce this. I want to thank all the writers of Beyond the 90 for keeping up their end of everything we're trying to do at the site. I personally have dropped the ball because of other commitments. But I wanted to talk today with the Copa America starting and the Euros going on about identity and international football, and specifically what it means here in the United States. Because I think this is a complicated topic. It's a topic that is wrapped up in nationalism and self-identity and all sorts of different things. And I have to admit, I've evolved on this topic and maybe am evolving back in a way, and I'm going to describe why that is. So in the 1990s, I couldn't fathom people rooting against the U.S. men's national team or the U.S. women's national team if they were living in this country. And I would, in fact, myself, I traveled a lot following the men's national team, in particular in those days. That was before I was a media member. That was when I was a fan. I was still working at the time as in government relations and as a political consultant for mostly Democratic Party candidates. I used to get nasty with people about not rooting for the United States, saying, "Hey, we're trying to build a football culture in this country. We're trying to build become a great soccer playing country. And those of you who are immigrants or first generation from other countries, you should be embracing what we're trying to do here." And I would be really nasty about it with Mexican national team fans, with fans who supported Brazil in particular. Actually, that was really one of my pet peeves, getting angry seeing all the Brazil shirts I would see in Florida, Argentina shirts, etc. And even when I played video games in those days, I couldn't fathom playing with any other national team. If there was a World Cup video game, EA Sports World Cup video game, or Road to the World Cup, playing with any other national team other than the United States. And maybe once or twice I would play with Canada just for kicks, but that was it. And Canada to me was, well, they're basically culturally American, right? That was, the American cultural imperialism on Canada is a long-standing thing. And one of the things that I've learned through the years, then when I began working in football, is Canadians need their own identity. They need their own kind of football independence, which is part of the reason I'm a big advocate for the Canadian Premier League. I'm a big advocate for them controlling their own institutions. I don't like the fact that they're reliant on MLS, which is a US-based league. But that's a whole subject for another time. But as I began working in football in the mid-2000s and then writing about football, my views began to change. And they began to change not because it was some great liberal mission that everybody should have their own self-identity, even though politically, historically, I've been sort of on the left, although I'm a Democrat because I believe in working class economic issues. Social issues don't really matter to me, but I don't want to get into politics. But the reason I began to evolve on this was working in football, working in soccer, and covering the sport. I began to realize, the U.S. men's national team in particular is just an extension of the U.S. Soccer Federation. And U.S. soccer, from my perspective, was misgoverning the game in this country. And I would continue to make those critiques up until to today. We talk about the pro league standards. We talk about them putting their fingers on the scale. We talk about the subsidies and favorable treatment they've given certain leagues over other leagues. We talk about all sorts of things, all sorts of issues with U.S. soccer. I think things are better now there than they used to be. But so we get into a period where I decide, I don't really care that much about the U.S. men's national team, particularly after Bob Bradley was sacked, a coach that I admire. I continue to admire, a coach that I have nothing but the greatest respect for, and was replaced by Jurgen Klinsmann, which I think was a vanity project on the part of Sunil Gulati. Absolute vanity project. So my relationship with the U.S. men I continue to support the U.S. women to this day. My relationship with the U.S. men changed at that point, and I began to see, you know what? Maybe these people who come from other footballing cultures, if they come from Uruguay or come from Argentina or come from Brazil or come from Germany or wherever, Scotland, England, maybe they're right because what they're seeing is U.S. soccer. The U.S. Soccer Federation is an entity that is about making money, is about certain goals which don't necessarily relate to improving opportunities for Americans playing football, playing soccer, and for American communities and clubs that are involved in the soccer pyramid or sort of pyramid in this country. So my views evolved. It became, okay, if people want to root against the U.S., that's cool. That's their business. And in fact, these days, I don't really care about international football that much. It's one of those things where international breaks annoy me. I applaud MLS and USL when they play through the international breaks. I don't necessarily care about the international tournaments. I don't really care about the Copa America. I don't really care about the Euros, truthfully. Don't really care about the World Cup. I mean, you're forced to watch it because everything else stops during the World Cup. But I've just gone through an interesting experience, which is with the cricket T20 World Cup that was co-hosted here in the United States. And the United States is playing very well in the tournament, much to just about everybody's surprise. The United States is in the final eight. They're fighting, they're battling, they're sticking with bigger sides. It feels like in some ways they're further along in cricket, having never qualified for a major tournament in the sport before this one. They're further along in terms of competitiveness than they are in football, strangely enough, or men's football. Obviously, women's side completely different. But what I observed in the cricket world the last 6 weeks, is that obviously cricket is a sport that is very popular, is most popular in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and South Asia. Also very popular in Australia and England, South Africa, and in the islands around here, West Indies. Not very popular in the rest of the world. But, you add up those markets, it makes it the second most popular sport in the world. It is still very popular. I shouldn't try and downplay. New Zealand, obviously, it's a leading sport in New Zealand as well. But what I observed is with the U.S. hosting the World Cup and the U.S. put in a group with Canada, Ireland, India, and Pakistan. And let's focus particularly on Indians and Pakistanis, of which there are numerous expats in the United States, and of which they are kind of at a higher economic strata than most immigrant groups. What I observed was when the U.S. played Pakistan, when the U.S. played India, a lot of Pakistani Americans and Indian Americans wearing their kits, their Pakistan kits, their Indian kits, but cheering also for the United States in the matches, waving American flags. I mean, the scenes in New York in the big India-U.S. game, which ended up being a very close game. India is the number one ranked team in the world entering this tournament. They're the pre-tournament favorites. The U.S. Took them to the limit, almost to the limit in that match, right? Took them to the final over. So the issue with, or almost took them to the final over, but the issue that I found was that a lot of Indian Americans want to root for India. India is the favorite. They feel Indian, but at the same time, they feel American. They're very proud of USA cricket and the development of cricket in the US, and they wanted to show their pride in the United States and wave American flags at the matches. And when I've talked to, in my role with doing media for this tournament, talked to Indian journalists and talked to Pakistani journalists, they are so proud of the sport catching on in the United States. And they're so proud of the South Asians that are in the United States team, that are carrying the United States team to a large extent. Some of the U.S. players are not South Asian, Andres House, among others. But Corey Anderson, obviously, is from New Zealand. But the majority of the team is either of Indian or Pakistani descent. So there's a lot of pride in that. And that has me thinking again about the football side, the soccer side. Should Mexican Americans, should Brazilian Americans, should, and one of my issues with Brazil also has been that there are a lot of just regular Americans who root for Brazil, which I never liked, but then came to accept, as I said earlier. Is this maybe the solution? You know, you can go wear a Mexican kid or a Germany kid or whatever, but you bring an American flag, you cheer for both sides. Or is football just too tribal a sport? Is international football so divisive and so tribal and so defined around fights between ethnicities and fights between nationalities that that's not possible? I don't have the answer, but this has really got me thinking again about this issue. And I know it's a very difficult issue, identity and nationalism and nation states and citizenship and all of this stuff. It's a political issue. It's a socioeconomic issue, as well as an issue around football or soccer, if you prefer the term soccer. But the cricket has really got me thinking about it because it's pretty amazing. Now, you could be cynical and just say, hey, there are a lot of people from India who know cricket is the number 2 sport in the world. But you can never really be, quote, big time unless you make penetration in the American market, which is the same equation FIFA made many, many years ago, right? The ICC has now made that same bet that you have to be relevant in America to be relevant. Maybe you don't, right? Because I guess the advantage cricket has over football is it has the Indian market, which is maybe the second biggest market in the world, right? Behind the US market, with China being kind of blocked off, right? Being a restricted market. So cricket does have that, right? They dominate the Indian market sports-wise. Wimbledon, French Open, those sorts of things kind of penetrate there. World Cup, Euros penetrate there, but not. I mean, cricket dominates most of the year in India and in Pakistan, which is also a fairly big country, but not. They don't have as much disposable income there. But it's just brought this question back to me: should people who are in the United States root or have some sympathy for the U.S. men and women, U.S. men's and women's national team? And then, of course, there is the issue that I brought up, which is why I'm kind of divorced from this whole scene, which is very clearly the issue of the U.S. Soccer Federation and what many of us would consider malfeasance in how they've governed the game, which is why they've been sued by multiple stakeholders, not just the U.S. women's players, but leagues they governed, their own charitable foundation, and Relevant Sports, although Relevant Sports, you could argue, is not a stakeholder in American soccer per se, but the other 3 were, and they got sued by them. So that's part of why people like me at one point said, you know what, the U.S. men's national team, the U.S. women is different, right? I think we all have, or at least I have, a different emotional relationship with the individual players who play for the women's national team. But on the men's side, it was like, they're kind of a corporate team, really, or they're just the team that represents this entity. But again, the cricket has me thinking about this whole issue of identity.